Well, there's lots of buzz out there right now about Apple's new computer systems, the M1s as they're called. People have got them in their hands, they're testing them, they're benchmarking them, they're throwing the kitchen sink at them, and coming up with some interesting results. But ultimately, how will these machines work for us as a DIT or a data manager in the rigors of production? Well, I wish I could say it was easy and not complicated, and I wish there was a lot of good news. Well, tell you what, roll up your sleeves, grab your favorite beverage, we're going to dig in. Well, okay, unless you've been offline for the last few months, you've got to be aware that Apple has new hardware out. These are ARM-based machines, kind of referred to as M1s. Now, I've got to kind of think personally that the reason why Apple has done this has been pretty much a long-standing friction between them and Intel. And Apple has the prowess, they have the money, and they have the technical expertise to develop pretty much anything they want, and that's what they've done. But they just didn't copy stuff. They designed something that is a little bit groundbreaking and solves some issues. In other words, it looks like a pretty good upgrade. But along with this comes a couple of questions that we need to have answered. And the first one is the hardware side of things. If we're going to part with our hard-earned money, are these machines really better than what we have? Now, if you have the really expensive Mac Pro Tower or the older Mac Pro trash can, or, and I've got some of them, the old Mac Pro cheese graters, or a fully dressed out MacBook Pro, a fairly recent one. Is it worth spending the money to upgrade to these machines? And that's going to be a twofold issues and question that we have to deal with. One is the hardware side of things. And the second one is the software side. Now, we're going to get to the software in a minute. But let's take a minute to look at the hardware and what they're doing in there. I'm not going to go too technically deep. You can find that elsewhere. But I'm going to give you an idea of what's going on under the hood and how it may or may not affect what we do. So let's roll into the hardware. Well, the new Mac M1s quite literally blew the Mac community right out of the water. Nobody would have thought that an ARM-based computer could compete with a multi-core, multi-hyper-threaded Intel-based CPU. Well, tests appear that it's doing quite well. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the Mac Mini, for example. All right, this is an understated little small computer that Apple's had around for quite a while. It just got a really good breath of new life. Now, a warning here, you need to put a little different thinking cap on because the terminology based around the system and the infrastructure of an ARM-based computer is different than what you've been looking at and comparing machines to machines over the past decades. The Mac Mini CPU has 8 cores, 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. But how does this equate to, say, a 4-core Intel chip with 4 hyper-threaded cores, creating 8 functional processing cores? Well, this information is kind of deep, a little bit inaccessible if you search the web, but apparently it works pretty well. So what you're going to learn from your web research is that this ARM architecture is different, it's new, and it doesn't really behave like what we're used to. Now, I don't want to go deep into this ARM architecture and how it all works. We would be here all week, but suffice to say, it does considerably change the platform and how it works to where when you maximize the use of this, or to maximize the use of this, it's a significant software rewrite. And we're going to talk more about that because it's really important in just a minute. The next item on our checklist is the graphics card, or the graphics GPU, because there isn't a graphics card in this computer. The new Mac Mini has a totally custom-built, integrated graphics processing unit. And all the specs say about this is it has 8 cores. Now, we wouldn't even consider a graphics card for what we do that had only 8 cores. But again, remember that little different thinking hat I told you to put on. This is going to behave considerably different than what other ones have. So what have you looked for in the past for a graphics card? All right, you've looked for lots of processing units. You've looked for NVIDIA or AMD. Those aren't part of the new Mac ecosystem. This is a custom processing unit now built onto the computer board. So that's now bygones. You also look for the number of cores for processing. Well, the new one says 8. That would be woefully under what we would normally look for when we're trying to figure out a card we're going to get. All right, we're also going to look for processing abilities for OpenCL, Metal, Pascal, CUDA, the CUDA cores, because the software we use, depending on which one it is, will leverage those various processing tasks in that engine inside of the card. That's not on the list here in the new Mac computers, whether it be the laptop or the Mac Mini and whatever they're going to come up with in the future. We use lots of RAM memory on our graphics cards. We can burn up 8 gigs in a hurry just doing color correction or a little bit of fusion or 3D work and transcoding. We'll burn up 8 to 16 gigs with that memory. We don't see that really listed here on this Mac Mini spec sheet. But we do see something called a neural engine. Okay, do a little reading on what that is. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, but I'm not sure that it answers everything that we need to know. Now, next, RAM memory. So the Mac Mini is offered with up to 16 gigs of unified memory. Now that's a new term when we're used to seeing RAM spec'd out as a DDR3 or DDR4 single or dual channel. Why the term unified? So what Apple's essentially done is created this unified or pool of memory that's shared for both your CPU tasks, your typical programs and paging, and the GPU shares the same memory. The ARM chip is very smart and very fast at managing this memory, allocating it as needed based on your tasks. And this does appear to be much faster in the way it responds and reacts than we are used to from our traditional computers, where the CPU has a little bit of memory built into it, and its RAM memory is over here, and the GPU memory is over here. They have to talk back and forth over different buses. That slows it down a little bit. This is a much cleaner, tidier, faster architecture. And in a nutshell, it works extremely well. And in fact, when you go and look for that OpenCL, which you're not going to find in the Metal, you're not going to find, what Apple is saying is that our internal speed and memory mapping and architecture is so fast that you're really not going to need those extra engines added on. And this all leads us to this thought you're probably having right now. What if I get one of those external PCI cases, throw in an AMD card, if you can find one right now? Crazy, right? And I can hook that up to the Thunderbolt 3 or 4 port, and I'll have an external GPU with all those, the engines that I need on that card, and I'll be able to do my processing. Well, good idea, but it's not going to work. Until Apple upgrades their architecture and their software, it's not possible, or it doesn't appear to be possible, to hook that external case and have the computer talk to an external GPU. This is not good news for our Fusion users, our 3D users, people doing CAD/CAM and things that are very graphic intensive for right now. So let's move on to the connections that Apple's offering now. On the Mac Mini, there's a good selection. The Thunderbolt, also known as USB 4, is fast. And there's USB 3C. And there's 2 legacy USB ports. Monitors can be connected via the Thunderbolt and HDMI ports, so dual monitors are supported. If we need more connections, and we do need more connections, there are now some options. OWC, Other World Computing, has offered expansion boxes for quite some time. Their new one is specifically designed for the new Macs. This happens to be an older one that I used successfully, and boy, it's a great tool for quite a few years off of a MacBook Pro. And this is based off of Thunderbolt 2. So it's a legacy box, but it still works really quite well. And people like Anchor have always put out these little breakouts for, this one's got card readers, got an HDMI port, and this is all working off the USB 3C connector. Now, there's other people putting these out right now. There are almost new ones almost every week supporting the new Mac, so you have lots of options when it comes to expanding the ports, which we desperately need for card readers and hard drives, and we need them to be fast on these systems. So the software that we use on a daily basis is built for a fairly niche market, fairly small market. Unlike photo editing software, which can have tens of thousands, if not millions of users, there's only a few thousand DITs or data managers worldwide. So it's a small audience. And a lot of these companies are fairly small in size and resources, unlike Adobe or Blackmagic, which have vast resources, both financially and as far as their development teams, they can do what they want to do. I got a hold of a lot of the providers of the software that we use, and I asked them, what does this look like to them? What does this mean to your software? And if we look at a company, let's say Imagine Software that makes ShotPut Pro, this is an interesting decision on their part. Now, when ShotPut Pro's great suite of tools is pretty much for data backup. So it's a low GPU use and even fairly low CPU use because it's just data managing throughput. And so we need really fast connections. Now, that would seem like a no-brainer, but there is apparently, until they write their code to the M1 architecture, you're not going to get full speed out of those ports. People are reporting at least a 10% reduction in speed, and even maybe a little bit more, depending on the chips that are in the card reader, the interface chips, and in the hard drives. So there's a penalty hit here, even though it's just a straight from the memory card through the bus and out to the hard drive. There appears to be a hit here. So Imagine Software has several titles, and they have maybe 10 employees. So this could be a serious investment in time. Now, what they have to figure out, as other ones do, is that can they write a piece of software that would detect whether this is an Intel-based computer, an M1, and react accordingly. I don't even know if that's possible, but if there's any indication, Blackmagic has DaVinci Resolve for Intel-based Macs, and then they have in beta the one for the M1s. So that sort of indicates to me that this is going to be more problematic and may even require two versions of this software, much like if you were to buy DaVinci Resolve for Intel, you can also get one that's specifically for Unix or Linux, and that's a different piece of software. So that's challenging for these companies to write software for multiple operating systems. But simply put, we're right back to where Apple was in that transition from OS 9 to 10. Now, Apple made this huge change more towards Unix under the hood, which it kind of always had been, but this was a huge shift. And they said, we're going to put code in here to allow our computer to read that legacy code for a while. And then eventually, long about Mavericks, or not Mavericks, but even Mojave and on into High Sierra, we started to see less and less titles working until finally now they won't run at all. They've taken that code out. All right, they give them quite a few years, the programmers, to get their code together. So the software vendor either did it or they dropped the title altogether. We might be seeing that happening in the software we use. We don't know yet because they don't know, quite frankly, the significance of the tasks. Now, The M1 chip requires significant tweaks on the application side to get full abilities here within to leverage all the power it has. And so a lot of these companies don't have really big budgets. I've mentioned that. So let's look at something like MTI. They make dailies and they make some other ones. They have both very simple copying software as very sophisticated color correction software. And it's the same with Scratch, Assimilate Scratch. Scratch is a powerhouse when it comes to color correction. It's a massively good, strong, fast program for DITs on set. But it also does compositing and really, really good web-aware collaborative color correction. This is a significant program. And I will say, in talking to a number of these companies, they felt that it was going to take at least a year and almost an army of programmers to figure this out. Now, making it even more difficult for them, Apple has done something this time around that we haven't seen so much in the past. Apple has always gotten out to their developing kits, technical documents, and tools to help them write code for their new operating system. They haven't done that very well with this one. Some people haven't even gotten their requested kits, and they're registered developers. And some of them don't even have their hands on one of the new Macs yet. So this is like, which came first, the horse or the cart? Well, right now they're flipping ends back and forth madly, and trying, which is not good for us, and it's not good for them either. So this is kind of a catch-22, isn't it? And add more on top of this, there's really strong rumors that there's an M2 version of this chip on its way. Hasn't been confirmed because, well, if Apple is nothing else, it's secretive. But what will that mean for the developers in the operating system? So do they choose to do a wait and see? Or do they delve into it and hope to adapt and spend more of their resources trying to catch up when the new one comes out? See how difficult it is we just buy the software and we use it and we really hope it works and it works well. It's a little bit more complicated for the people we buy it from and very, very costly. Okay, have we come anywhere close to answering the question whether I should jump in or not? I don't know. All right. So here's some things I would like to have you think about. And these are kind of personal introspective things. If you're an early adopter, you like grabbing onto technology early on, and you really can tolerate the problems that go along with that, I would say jump in. Buy one of these machines, whether it be the laptop or the Mac Mini, which is a surprisingly good value for right now, for the horsepower, and ride that stallion. If you're a little bit more wait and see, then if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, I remember on the forums when Apple dropped Final Cut 7. All right, they dropped it and everybody went, oh no, what am I going to do? It's, I can't edit, I can't deal with my clients. Well, they dropped development on it. They didn't kill the program so it wouldn't run. And I know some people that are still nursing along 7 today because they've chosen to stay on an older operating system. All right, then out came the woefully lacking Final Cut Pro, and then people made their move in their migration as that went along. So again, just because they have this new architecture and new operating system doesn't mean your world ends today. You can continue to use what works for you and make money and be happy as a clam until you feel comfortable jumping in. When is that time? Well, make sure your software that you use will run on this. Even if it runs in legacy mode, which is fine, but if it runs in full operational mode, and in fact root mode on that M1 chip, then all the better. That would be my first indication that I would want to move, that the tools that I use to make money are there. You may also have to look at the reality that you're just getting into being a DIT or a data manager and you're buying hardware. Now this becomes a tough decision. Do I go find a good used machine, something a year or two old, maybe a very nice fully loaded MacBook Pro, or even a trash can, the MacBook Pro trash cans, that's been pretty well decked out and are reasonably priced used now, finally, that will get you through for a couple of years until this settles down. You'll fully depreciate those machines. Production is really hard on machines if you haven't done it. We beat them up, we ride them hard and put them up wet, as people with horses say. And they're done. When we're done with them, they're done. And so if you can get a couple of years out of a reduced price used machine and be making money and working in the industry until you feel comfortable buying something new and making that transition if your budget happens to be such. So I think the toughest decision is for that person that needs a machine right now and they need to start working. What do you buy? And finally, if you buy one, which one do you get? Do you get the new laptop or do you get the Mac Mini? That's pretty much our choices for this right now, because they are just rumor announcing, sort of leaking out that they are going to have at least one, if not two, replacements for the Mac Pro towers. We have no idea what they're going to look like. It's all rumors. We have really no solid feeling as to what they're going to do internally on these. And boy, hopefully they will not be as expensive as the last Mac Pro towers. That was stratospheric and really not a good financial decision, I don't think, for a DIT or a media manager. You would have to work a lot at full union rates to pay for one of those machines. They were just too expensive. So we have a lot of unknowns now about this, the new Mac Pro, which could be very promising. So which one do you get? The indications that I'm seeing is maybe stay away from the laptops. A data manager could probably use the laptop just fine with one of the expansion boxes, but a DIT I don't think is going to, like the outcome with the new laptops. Again, you really need to get one, borrow one from somebody if they've got it, hook it up, load your software, see if the software runs, how fast it runs, and will it work for you. The Mac Minis that people have been using on YouTube, they were the first ones and easiest ones to get. And they're throwing Premiere at it and Resolve, and they're throwing all these tools at it, and they're loading it up. And they're finding out it's performing pretty darn well. Pretty darn well. So the Mac Mini, for really a pittance, a fraction of what the laptops cost, could work for you. Obviously you're going to need a monitor, you need a couple of monitors anyway. The Mac Mini will handle that. Maybe that's a good transition decision. But the one thing that everybody is saying is, because that memory, that RAM memory in there, that pool of memory is hard soldered, it's built into that board, you cannot expand it later. Get the 16 gig model. Get the one with the, we always do that anyway, right? We buy the biggest, baddest machine we can buy because we throw some pretty heavy stuff at it. Same here, get the 16 gigs. It may not seem like enough because a lot of people like myself, I've got 32 gigs in my machine, and I sometimes bump up against the top of that when I'm doing some heavy-duty stuff, especially larger resolution files. This pool of memory works way differently than other pools of memory do. And in fact, the SSD that's hard affixed to these motherboards, because of the way it's connected to the memory, it is unbelievably fast. So when you have loaded up all that memory, it will start paging, which is usually death for us, to page out to a hard drive or out to an SSD to act as RAM memory. It doesn't appear to be any degradation in speed on these new machines. If it is, it's insignificant. So that's good news. So that 16 gigs will get you going, and if it needs more, it'll tap into the internal SSD. Well, I hope this has been helpful. Is there an answer? The answer is for you to determine. I think these are going to be very good machines for us in the future, maybe the near future, and because Apple is constantly throwing out patches and software updates and firmware updates on these machines. It's going to evolve, I think, fairly quickly, at least within the year period here, which is pretty normal for this. I think it's going to be a solid, good jump for us as DITs. When you jump in, that's your thing. So again, hope this has been helpful. Boy, hit that like button, subscribe so that you can have more information and more of these videos as I get them out. And as always, I hope to see you on set.